Let's go on the record, and we need to talk about Halloween, and I mean really talk about it. I'm not saying just a surface level conversation about candy and costumes, but really a deep dive into what most people are afraid to talk about. Halloween is one of the biggest holidays in America. We are talking about a $12 billion industry. We're talking candy, we're talking costumes, we're talking haunted houses, decorations that transform entire neighborhoods. And honestly, some of my most viral videos ever as a content creator have been Halloween themed. These costume reveals, spooky challenges, and October content, well, they performed really well. But here's the truth. I was creating content around something that I'd never fully researched. And I was raised in a Christian household, I've told you guys that, and we didn't celebrate Halloween, and I knew it was because of the occult connections, but in my mind, fast forward to me creating content, I was just creating these videos at home. It's just harmless fun. These are just viral videos, but I'm not really coming into agreement with Halloween, right? Well, I was wrong. I was actually promoting a holiday that I didn't really understand. So last year, when someone commented on one of my videos, they asked me this. They said, do you actually know what it is that you're celebrating? And I realized, well, I can't really answer that question. So I did what I do when something is bothering me, and I went down a research rabbit hole. And before we get into what that is, don't forget to subscribe, join the channel for deep dives every Thursday and Sunday. Now, let's get into it, because what I found changed everything. So today we're going to be diving into the real history of Halloween, also known as All Hallows Eve, what it actually means. Because whether you're a person of faith or not, whether you have kids or not, the origins and the modern reality of this holiday deserve serious consideration. Let's start way back at the beginning, and I mean the real beginning. This isn't just a sanitized version that most people know. Halloween has roots in an ancient Celtic festival called Samhain. We are talking practices that go back over 2,000 years. The Celts lived in what is now called Ireland, Scotland, and parts of France. They had a very different understanding of October 31st than we do today. Now, for the Celts, Samhain marked the end of their harvest season and the beginning of winter, what they called the dark half of the year. It wasn't just about changing seasons. This is something that was deeply spiritual. They believed that on October 31st, the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead became the thinnest. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a metaphor to them. They genuinely believed that spirits could cross over into our world during this time. Now, we are talking about the souls of the dead, supernatural entities, and otherworldly beings that they both feared and tried to appease. There is archaeological evidence to back this up. There's Neolithic passage tombs in Ireland that are actually aligned with the sunrise during Samhain, suggesting that these beliefs go back even further than Celtic culture, and they say possibly 4,000 to 5,000 years. Here's where it gets historically complex. There's Roman historians like Julius Caesar who documented Celtic practices, and while we need to view these accounts cautiously, Romans had political reasons to portray their enemies negatively, and archaeological discoveries have supported some of these claims. Caesar wrote that the Celts believed ritual offerings were necessary to gain divine favor. Now, we have found evidence of ritual deposits, ceremonial weapons, and yes, even human remains that suggest the ritualistic practices occurred during these festivals. The Celts would dress in costumes during Samhain not for fun, but for protection. They believed that by disguising themselves as spirits or animals, they could avoid being recognized and harmed by supernatural entities roaming the earth. They carved faces into turnips, the original jack-o'-lanterns, and they placed candles inside of them. These weren't for decorations, these were believed to represent souls and were used in spiritual practices. Bonfires were central to the Samhain celebration. These were not cozy campfires. We are talking about massive community fires where, according to historical records, offerings were made. The word bonfire actually comes from bone fire, referring to the practice of burning bones as part of these rituals. People would leave food outside of their homes, and this was not just for trick-or-treaters, this was to appease the spirits that they believed were wandering. Now, if you didn't provide adequate offerings, you then risk being tricked, cursed, or haunted by these malevolent spirits. Fast forward several centuries. Christianity is now spreading through Europe, and the church leaders encounter these deep-rooted pagan practices. Here's where the story gets very interesting to me. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III, he dedicated a chapel in St. Peter's Basilica to the All Saints on November 1st. This became known as All Saints' Day, and October 31st became All Hallows Eve. So literally the evening before All Saints' Day. Historians debate whether this timing was something that was intentional, designed to Christianize existing pagan festivals, or was it coincidental? What we do know for certain is that the church attempted to redirect these autumn celebrations towards the Roman Catholic themes of honoring saints and the martyrs. But here's the thing, we can't just rebrand spiritual practices and expect the underlying beliefs to disappear. Historical records from the monasteries across Europe, well, they document that people continued to practice elements of the old ways even after the Christian holidays were established. The church thought that they could sanctify these practices, but the costumes, the spiritual themes, the focus on death and the spirits, these all remained. The spiritual significance that people attached to October 31st didn't just vanish just because it was given a Christian name. So let's jump to the 19th century and see how these ancient practices made their way to the United States. The Irish potato famine of the 1840s drove massive immigration from Ireland to the United States. But these Irish immigrants weren't just bringing folk customs, they were bringing traditions that had been passed down through generations, rooted in these Celtic practices. Historical records from cities like New York document Halloween gatherings in Irish immigrant communities that include divination practices and attempts to communicate with the dead. Rituals believed to provide protection from evil spirits. These aren't just costume parties, these are spiritual observances. Now, as Halloween spread across America, it evolved but maintained its connection to supernatural themes. The jack-o'-lantern tradition jumped from turnips to pumpkins, but the purpose remained the same. Carved faces meant to ward off evil spirits. And the practice of trick-or-treating developed from the old Celtic customs of leaving offerings for spirits. So if you didn't treat the roaming spirits well, they would trick you with curses or hauntings. By the 1920s, American companies began mass producing Halloween decorations and turning the holiday into a commercial enterprise. And this is where things get very interesting from a cultural perspective. The imagery of the holiday, it didn't change. We still had the witches, the demons, the ghosts, the skulls, the symbols of death and darkness. But now it has been marketed as something that is fun, as entertainment, as harmless celebration. By the 1950s, Halloween had been successfully rebranded as a children's holiday. Think about that transformation. A festival with roots in communicating with the dead, appeasing spirits, and marking the beginning of the dark half of the year. Well, now it's being promoted as the perfect themed holiday for children. The symbols have remained the same, and the timing has remained the same. The imagery of death, darkness, and supernatural forces has remained the same. The only thing that has changed is the marketing. Here's what really opened my eyes during my research. While most Americans may think of Halloween as secular fun, actual practitioners of various spiritual traditions and the occult take October 31st very seriously. Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, he wrote this in the Satanic Bible, and I quote, "After one's own birthday, the two major satanic holidays are Walpurgisnacht and Halloween." This isn't just hidden knowledge, it's documented in their foundational text. Now, there's modern Wiccan and neo-pagan groups who also openly call Halloween, which they still refer to as Samhain, their most sacred holiday. They still believe that October 31st is when the veil between the worlds is the thinnest. Contemporary paganism is growing here in America. Now, for these communities, Halloween isn't just about candy or costumes, this is their religious new year. And in Salem, Massachusetts, every Halloween, they still gather for what they consider to be their most important spiritual observance. One practitioner told a reporter that Salem is the Mecca, especially around Samhain. It is our holiday, our new year. And on a personal note, in the town I used to live in, on Halloween, witches would go up to the top of this hill that would overlook our city and they would curse it. Modern occult supply stores also report their highest sales on Halloween. So we're talking about tarot cards, crystals, ritual supplies, spell books are just flying off off the shelves. And social media has really amplified the interest in these practices. There's hashtags like witch talk, which have hundreds of millions of views. So young people are now exploring these things, these dark things like tarot cards, spell casting, and other occult practices. The practitioners of these traditions, they are not confused about Halloween's significance. They very much understand it. They know its spiritual meaning, and they are celebrating it. Meanwhile, we have Christians who are participating in the same imagery and these traditions without actually understanding the spiritual significance that others attach to them. Our culture has become increasingly fascinated with death, horror, and darkness. There are horror movies that are grossing billions of dollars. There are true crime content that is dominating streaming platforms. There is haunted house attractions that are getting more and more elaborate and terrifying every single year. Halloween both reflects and amplifies this cultural obsession. It makes death seem entertaining, and it normalizes the supernatural and occult imagery as harmless and even fun. Let's go off the record for a second and let me get personal with you. Now, I told you that some of my most viral content was Halloween themed. These videos brought in hundreds of thousands of views. They brought in new followers, they brought in new partnerships, and Halloween content was incredibly profitable for me as a creator. But as I grew deeper in my faith and I started asking myself these uncomfortable questions, even if I wasn't intentionally celebrating anything dark, was I still participating in and promoting something that had genuine spiritual significance for practitioners of other religions? I knew that stepping away from this content would mean giving up content that performed incredibly well, and I couldn't continue to promote something without understanding what I was actually encouraging people to participate in. As a Christian, I also had to examine what is it that the word says about these themes and practices. So Ephesians 5:11, it says this, and it stopped me in my tracks. It says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It doesn't say not just a little bit or only the fun parts, it says nothing. And Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12 is even more explicit about this. It says, let no one be found among you who practices divination or sorcery, who interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells. So anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Then it goes even deeper. 1 Peter 5:8 reminds us, be alert and be sober-minded. Your enemy is the devil who prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Friends, these aren't just suggestions. These are very clear directives about avoiding practices and imagery associated with darkness and the occult. Now, I want to be really honest with you guys about my internal struggle with this. And it wasn't at the time just about giving up profitable content. It was also about examining my heart. Was I really more concerned about maintaining my engagement rates rather than aligning my content with my stated beliefs? Was I actually prioritizing my business over spiritual integrity? And honestly, these were really hard questions, and the answers that I came up with weren't really comfortable. And I realized, really, I had been compartmentalizing my faith and my content creation as two totally separate things. What I was saying was that I wanted to reflect Christ in everything that I did, while simultaneously promoting imagery and traditions directly tied to the cult and to practices that scripture just clearly warns us against. Ultimately, I ended up making the decision to step away from Halloween content, not because I think everybody who celebrates Halloween is evil or wrong, but because I couldn't continue promoting something that I felt convicted of with my personal convictions. The peace that came from that decision, it was immediate and it was profound, and I realized how much mental and spiritual energy I had been spending trying to justify participating in something that made me uncomfortable. Now, if you're a parent wrestling with Halloween, I understand the complexity. Your kids see their friends participating, the cultural pressure is enormous, you don't want to be that weird family, but I encourage you to research this for yourself. Look into the dark history, consider what are the values that you want to model for your children, and consider the eternal value. Ask yourself this, what am I teaching my kids about entertainment that glorifies death, fear, and darkness? This isn't just about Halloween, this is a little bit deeper. This is about how we engage with cultural practices as people of faith. How do we live in the world without being of the world? And if every cultural tradition deserves some form of examination, every holiday, every practice, every form of entertainment should be weighed against our stated beliefs and our values. The question isn't whether something is popular or even profitable or fun. The question is whether it aligns with who it is that we say that we are, and who it is that we want to be and what it is that we claim to believe. I am not here to make any decisions for anybody else, but I do want to challenge you. That is the whole purpose of this show. Don't just follow the crowd and the group think. Don't participate in traditions simply because they're popular or profitable or fun, but do your own research, look into the history, and if you're a person of faith, go back. What does the word say about it? Pray about it. These practitioners of these spiritual traditions understand the deep significance of October 31st, and they are in no means confused by its spiritual meaning. They know exactly what they're doing and what it is that they're celebrating, and also why. So shouldn't we understand it just as clearly before we participate in it? And look, I know this is a very controversial topic that I will get a lot of pushback on, even from Christians. And I know some of you will disagree with my conclusions. And look, that is totally okay. We are all on our own journeys. We are all making decisions based on our understanding, our truth, and our personal convictions. But I do think that it's important that we do make informed decisions rather than just unconscious ones, that we understand what we're participating in rather than just going along with cultural expectations. We have to understand that our eyes and ears are gates, and what we allow in, well, it shapes how we think, it shapes what we value, and it shapes who we become. Being intentional about entertainment choices and cultural participation really matters, whether you decide to celebrate Halloween or not. I just hope that you'll make this decision thoughtfully, prayerfully, and with the full knowing of what it is that you're choosing. Now it is your turn to go on the record. Don't forget to subscribe, join the family. We have new deep dives every Thursday and Sunday, and comment below. Let me know what it is that you think about this topic. Did today's episode challenge your perspective or change anything for you? I would love to hear your thoughts, and I will see you guys in the next episode.